What is going on, guys? We are going to be going live again. I just wanted to give some quick analysis. I'm going to read some articles again. Once again, second time going live. I know I didn't give any notice, so pop in, pop out. I'm still trying to develop a rhythm. It's hard to kind of go live when you're just starting to go live, right? So I haven't built out like my live schedule yet, but I will here soon. And then you guys will be able to kind of listen in or tune in, or at least know more of what to expect when I go live. Because I know the goal of going live is to do it the same time every day, right? Which is not necessarily what I'm doing. So we're going to go ahead and look at some of the news today, especially when it comes to the spot Bitcoin ETF. I just want to give like a quick note on the spot Bitcoin ETF, and I'm also going to try to figure out how to make the screen more clear for you guys, because the goal is for you to be able to read the articles along with me. But for some reason, it just kind of sounds blurry, which is fine, because that's why I'm here to kind of narrate it for you and just tell you what I find interesting. I made a video on TikTok yesterday talking about the whole fiasco with Gary Gensler and the spot Bitcoin ETFs, and it immediately got banned. So no surprise there. But I was really just going over the psychology of if that was an inside job or not. So what would that look like? So I want to teach you guys one way that government, politicians, people who don't like you can actually create a scenario in which if they know you're going to have a win, they can take that win away from you. And taking a win away from somebody does not necessarily mean that you don't kind of win in the end, but it modifies the way in which you win. So we're going to use the spot Bitcoin ETF as an example. So we know that a spot Bitcoin ETF is going to happen. It absolutely is going to happen. And I firmly believe that. The big question is when. When is a spot Bitcoin ETF going to happen? So we have all this lead up. We have all this build up for this week. And we see Gensler starting to say some things. We have a lot of personalities who are saying some things about the Bitcoin spot ETF. And we're ready, right? A lot of people have kind of said, oh, I don't think it's going to happen this week. A lot of other people said it is going to happen this week. So then someone leaks from the official SEC Twitter account that a spot Bitcoin ETF is going to be approved. In fact, all of the spot Bitcoin ETFs are going to be approved. So everyone gets super excited, gets super hyped. We see a price jump. And then shortly thereafter, Gensler says, oh, the account was hacked. And I think Elon Musk on Twitter today even said, oh, it does look like he didn't have 2FA set up. And it was hacked. Hacked meaning someone didn't necessarily gain access to the SEC's password. It's probably someone who already had the password, maybe an intern, maybe an employee, and they posted it either too early or were told to, and then Gensler retracted. So what I think happened is I think that was on purpose, just guessing from how government operates, because what happened? It gave us kind of the satisfaction of knowing that we won and that a spot Bitcoin ETF was approved. And in about 30 minutes to an hour, you saw on every news channel, every influencer, the hype, the excitement, everyone was going crazy. Finally, we had this moment that we've really been waiting for say 2 years. It could even be longer, because really we've been wanting a spot Bitcoin ETF for longer than that. But the time has finally come. And then boom, they say, oh, it was actually an error. We were hacked. And all the excitement and all the enthusiasm is now gone. So that's how you take a win away from people, because more than likely the spot Bitcoin ETFs will be approved. Today's Wednesday. They could be approved today, tomorrow, Friday. It could be approved next week. It could be approved 6 months from now. But there's a lot of glory and euphoria that comes from that initial win, that initial first, oh, it's been approved. Everyone can celebrate. We won. We're the good guys. Screw Gensler. Look at what we finally have. But now when it is finally approved, it's kind of already been approved. So we kind of already know. We kind of already got that euphoric feeling now. So when it is finally approved, the hype isn't going to be the same. It's not going to feel like a win. It's going to just be like a, Oh, finally. Okay, so it was approved. We did finally get approval. The hype is not the same. The enthusiasm is not the same. And as we know, enthusiasm and hype not only drive price, but they really drive community. They drive political strength. They drive mimetic momentum. They drive a lot of things. That feeling, that euphoria, would have given the space a lot of extra energy and positivity that it needs to, I think, really get the next bull run going. I know I think we're already in a bull run. A lot of people have stated that, but we're talking like, okay, now it's time. Now we're ready. You'd see increased adoption in attendance at conferences and the price and the amount of altcoins showing up and stuff like that. But now, unfortunately, because that win has kind of been taken away from us, now it's simply just going to look like, oh, another piece of news, right? And that is very strategic. We actually see that happen in some political situations where you will have media leaks, right? Because a lot of media leaks are planned leaks. You'll have a lot of media leaks about, let's say there's some negative news, and you can kind of think of different scenarios in your mind. There will be negative news about a popular individual or a prominent individual, a president, a former president, congressman, that'll be leaked. And it'll be negative but unproven. That way people can say, oh, they stink, they're terrible. I always knew they were X, Y, and Z, but we don't have the proof yet. And then they might wait, and 6 months from now, then the proof finally settles, but the hype's already been exposed. The people are kind of already ingrained who want to believe that, oh, yeah, so we now have proof that it's true. We can go back and claim rights and say, hey, I told you so, I told you so, but it's not as satisfactory, it's not as driven, it's not as euphoric. So you're winning, but you don't get the feeling of a win. And the feeling of a win is almost far more important than the win itself. And that's a lot of political play. I mean, that's how politics works. And a lot of times it's how the truth in media works, is that it's all that matters is excitement. And the actual truth doesn't matter. The perception of the truth is what matters. And you see that time and time and again play out in the political world, unfortunately. I wish that wasn't true. I don't want that to be true, but that normally seems to be what is true. So today, I kind of want to go over some of what I have in the headline. One of the more interesting things I think is going to be the final Republican primary presidential debate. Once again, Trump is not attending. He doesn't have to attend. He's been doing some conferences. He's visited Iowa the least. And the polling is wishy-washy. Who knows what the polling is actually going to do? But let's take a step back and look at the overall picture of, we have Trump, Nikki Haley, Vivek, and DeSantis. Finally, the Iowa primary is Monday. This is a big moment that we've all been waiting for, because essentially after Iowa, we're going to be able to have a lot more clarity and coalesce, I think, around a certain group of people. And that's really the point of primaries, is a coalition to figure out who we can finally circle around to propel forward to the general election. My gut tells me Trump is going to win Iowa. My gut tells me Trump is going to win New Hampshire, and that a lot of these polls are pretty much pointless. I have no evidence of that other than just my general feeling, my gut, right? And that's not the greatest thing to say, but sometimes your gut can be smarter than whatever statistics are out there on the internet. But let's look at some different scenarios. So the primary process is about a few things. One, it's about momentum. Okay, so momentum is what's important. That's why DeSantis has been focused so much on Iowa, because his bet, his hope, his guess is that a strong presence in Iowa will leapfrog him into New Hampshire, and then into, I think it's South Carolina, and then into Super Tuesday. And you can ride that momentum. Actually, in 2016 or in 2015, during the Republican primary, that was actually Marco Rubio's goal. Marco Rubio was, I think, like third in New Hampshire, and then second. No, he was third in Iowa, second in New Hampshire, and he was set to win whatever the next primary was. But then there was a presidential debate in which Chris Christie annihilated him and killed his momentum. And that's once he lost that momentum, he couldn't recover. And that was a pretty big tragedy on his part. But it shows you that this is all about momentum. Momentum is what matters. So DeSantis' goal is perform very strong in Iowa, hopefully win, ride that momentum into New Hampshire, even though the polling, which doesn't matter, says that he's not going to win New Hampshire. We have the Vivek card. I don't think Vivek is going to do too well in the sense that my guess is most people who like Vivek are just going to end up voting for Trump, and that Vivek is just kind of there, really talented speaker, but he's almost stumping for Trump. And I know how that's going to translate because, in a sense, Vivek votes are going to transition to Trump in the general election, of course, anyway. But he's just a very good speaker. He's so very talented at speaking. I'm always impressed when people try to give him like a gotcha moment, and he's probably the best speaker, I think, in the Republican primary field as far as eloquence. Nikki Haley says polls say she's going to do well in New Hampshire. Her goal might be to just finish third or second in Iowa and then do better. So if she gets third in Iowa and then second in New Hampshire, the media will say building momentum, and then maybe she could trounce Trump in South Carolina. But once again, I don't see that happening, even with her building momentum. I think the Republican Party as a whole just really hates her. The only difference it would make is it's essentially a Nikki Haley DeSantis fight. I don't think either of them are going to bow out. I think they're both going to see it through to the end, even though their votes would translate to each other. So I think anyone voting for Nikki Haley would vote for DeSantis. Anyone voting for DeSantis would vote for Nikki Haley. So strategically, if you really dislike Trump, you're probably encouraging one of those people to drop out right after Iowa, but I doubt that's going to happen. And in fact, that almost gives credence to the argument that maybe DeSantis is working for a Trump-like surrogate in order to trounce Haley, vice versa with Haley. Haley could just be a Trump plant to take votes away from DeSantis. We saw that with Biden when Elizabeth Warren stayed in to take votes away from Bernie. Had Elizabeth Warren not stayed in, her voters would have gone to Bernie, and Bernie would have won the 2020 Democratic primary. That I can guarantee. It's all in the numbers. If you look back and just add all of Elizabeth Warren's votes to Bernie's votes, he would have gotten all the delegates, which would have created a very interesting scenario. But yeah, let's bring in some articles. So this is a good one. Will DeSantis get left out in the cold in Iowa? So they have a debate tonight. I don't know how well that's gonna. She's a pretty decent debater, but she's also awful and very stupid. Vivek was really good at roasting her. I don't know if DeSantis is prepared for that. I think he's just going to call her a warmonger the whole time. But after nearly a year of intense campaigning that at first featured a large field, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis will stand on the stage Wednesday night for the fifth and final debate. Trump won't be there. Yes, we know. For DeSantis, once considered Trump's most challenging opponent, Iowa has become a matter of political survival. Not a good sign. He's aligned super PACs have spent tens of millions on air and ground in Iowa. A third place finish in Iowa would almost certainly mean a one-way ticket back to Tallahassee for the Florida governor. That is absolutely true because he staked everything there. Blah, 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 blah. I want to see if they talk about... Okay, so that's just saying if DeSantis doesn't do well in Iowa, he's screwed. Okay, duh. We kind of already know that. So Trump's legal arguments, I know we kind of saw some of that coming in. Year we stopped Trump's rolling insurrection. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. So beware of New Hampshire's Haley Rhino Trump trap. Peter Navarro. Peter Navarro is a pretty establishment kind of person. Never Trump Rhino establishment is only two shots to take down Donald Trump. Nikki Haley is its trigger girl, backed by a flood of Rhino dark money. What makes money dark? It's just a stupid term. Party switching gambit by Democratic strategists. Miss Haley hopes to pull her Trump trigger first in New Hampshire, then in South Carolina. See if she can get first or second place in New Hampshire and then ride that momentum to South Carolina, which is her home state. So that's her strategy, which, man, Republicans in South Carolina are very interesting. South Carolina probably has some of the worst publicly elected officials in the nation, Nikki Haley being one of them. But that would be her strategy. It's interesting because South Carolina is obviously a very strong primary state. Preloading of New Hampshire is particularly unfortunate for Americans who like their elections free of gamemanship, as this punitively Republican primary is not exclusively for registered Republicans. Instead, the granted state allows undeclared voters to vote, and the math heavily favors the never Trump rhinos. That's interesting. So anyone can vote. You don't have to just be a Republican to vote in the New Hampshire primary. So traditionally, primaries are set up pretty interestingly in the sense that you have this balance between getting a radical candidate because that's kind of what primaries attract, but then also balancing out that radicalism, and that's supposed to be New Hampshire's job. But with such a small field, that kind of changes the math a little bit. Yeah, consider 30% of registered voters in New Hampshire are Republicans, while 40% are unaffiliated, which means all those unaffiliated people could vote, which means Democrats could vote in the Republican primary if they're unaffiliated. I mean, not registered Democrats. Thus, if the Haley stalking horse gets a bump from Democratic crossover voters and an even bigger bump from independents voting in the Republican primary, she'll be able to grab a much bigger share of the 2022 delegates up for grabs in New Hampshire. His problem is, what about DeSantis? How many votes is he going to steal from her? But Sununu endorsing her was interesting. Mr. Sununu is the worst of rhinos, a neocon globalist from the Bush-Cheney tree, more than happy to send our men and women off to die, to lose their limbs. Oh, no wonder he endorsed Nikki Haley. Mr. Sununu's daddy, John, was George H.W. Bush's White House chief of staff. Isn't that funny, these networks and how they run? Like, would you ever know that? You would think someone is an independently elected official until you find out that they've actually are a part of the political system and have been for quite some time. You can likewise count on the possibility that Mr. Trump will ever tap Nikki Haley as his running mate. Yeah, that'll never happen. Get my Shakespearean drift. As one of the most untrustworthy globalists in the Trump cabinet, Donald Trump knows it too. Yeah, so kind of strategy that I've already kind of outlined. Biden crackdown on dishwashers. Biden approval 39.9%, whatever that means. Yeah, so what is the IO? This is the current polling. Yeah, see, this is like when Trump. Yeah, see that? Look at DeSantis, man. Talk about political momentum, and political momentum's what matters. Once again, these polls could be completely fake, but let's assume real quick that they're true, the green being DeSantis and the purple being Trump. Trump's momentum never goes away. DeSantis's does. It tapers off, especially here. Boom, from yes, he starts at 28, boom, 25, boom, 23, boom, 17, right? Just crushed. Now, once again, I don't know how they're asking these questions. I don't know if in this particular poll they're asking the same thing, but look at man, I want to see Ramaswamy. Look at Ramaswamy's momentum actually kind of grows, which is interesting. Like he's the momentum is picking up in Iowa. Um, he's done more stops and more visits than anybody else in Iowa, by the way, which I find interesting. Mhm. I have to find look at all these Trump signal. Let me see the signal. Oh, this is just gonna go Ron DeSantis is at the highest. Yeah, it's funny, there's no this is a total of 162 people. 48 for DeSantis, 60 for Trump, 31 undecided. LL 1 for Asa Hutchinson. That's so funny. Aren't people funny? Um, let's go ahead and let's look at more. I wonder if they're gonna mention the Bitcoin ETF. Paul Krugman, not reading that. Rep. Warren Davidson, misguided calls to illicit finance, non-problem. This is probably about Bitcoin. Congress has been inundated with calls to create an expansive anti-money laundering framework to address the over-exaggerated and often mischaracterized presence of illicit finance in the digital asset ecosystem. Congratulations, this article is about Bitcoin. It's time we had a serious discussion on what these proposals entail and why they're misguided. First, much of this debate has been reinvigorated by Hamas, which we know all that stuff Elizabeth Warren posted was a scam. The media then incorrectly reported that the terrorist group raised $93 million via digital assets. Claim turned out to be false. Saying that the policy proposals don't understand how information is transmitted over the blockchain. That's true. Second, it's a dishonest argument that says digital wallet providers must be considered in the same realm as a financial institution. Big software implications for that because it means any digital app doing any transfer of value in any way, shape, or form can now be part of our anti-money laundering laws, which is what AML is, anti-money laundering. That wouldn't make any sense at all. So I'm trying to criticize my Keep Your Coins Act, which would ban any agency's attempt to interfere with a person's right to personally hold their digital assets in a self-hosted wallet. My bill simply preserves what should be unanimously accepted as an inalienable property right. That's one of the key factors, by the way, that a lot of people I don't think understand is the fact that actually attacks in the crypto world and attacks on digital assets more often than not are actually gateways to attack your physical property. And that's kind of lost on some people. I remember actually, it wasn't the first time I kind of understood that was when Caitlin Long was talking about her tokenization act in Wyoming, talking about how traditionally property belongs to state legislation by labeling all digital assets as a security. That means if it's a digital asset, then they have a gateway into your physical assets and labeling your physical asset as property of the federal government, which is not good. That's not what you want. It goes to show that there's nothing new under the sun. And so a lot of times, anytime there's a new piece of technology, it's often grafted into legislation already. They just have to do minor tweaks. And anytime there's a big overhaul, it means they're trying to come after something using the new technology to grab at something that they haven't been able to do before, which is popular government technique. Let's look at the world and see what's going on in the world. All right. Um, Long shadow of Red Sea shipping disruption. You know what's funny is the majority of our world is made up of choke points that if uh, if the choke point is hurt, like trade comes to a halt. The Red Sea, not the Bering Strait, the Red Sea, the Strait of Malacca, the Strait of Hormuz, and then of course, man, what's the one in Turkey that now I can't remember that's famous? Strait in Turkey. All of those um, become checkpoints in the world and like hyper focused points. So now, anything going on with shipping disruptions in the Red Sea, that's what they're worried about with the Houthis. More than 80% of international trade by volume is transported by sea. As the current situation in the Red Sea illustrates, disruptions to shipping routes can have wide-reaching effects. No duh. The Red Sea is one of the main trade routes between Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. 10% of world trade by volume utilizes this route. This includes 20% of all container shipping, nearly 10% of seaborne oil, and 8% of container pricing surge. Interesting. Container pricing surge. And that's because of the war? Medium term, one of the largest issues will be ships simply being in the wrong place. Supply chains have evolved to meet just in time strategies. This creates a delicate balance between each part of the supply chain, which is especially pressure between containers and ships. One of Toyota's biggest inventions was the just-in-time process. Just-in-time means they only make your order based upon when it's actually created. So there's no long list of inventory because manufacturing has gotten so quick, processing has gotten so quick, and supply chains have gotten so efficient that if I want something now, they can get that order, make it, create it, ship it, and get it to your house in time to where they don't have to pay the extra cost of just having it sitting there waiting because those inventory costs get unbearably high over time. So it's better for companies just in time, but COVID screwed that up, and now it's a luxury good. Just in time supply chains are a luxury good when everything's secure, and you don't have to hold inventory because you're not going to have any shocks. Shows you how we used to be a very peaceful world, and that is not true anymore. Vessels going dark when ships turn off transponders connected to tracking systems has long posed a major risk. Yeah, welcome to the world of illicit activity. Red Sea has long been a hotspot for this activity due to its central positioning to countries bound by international trade sanctions, ergo Iran, maybe Qatar. Is it reflected in insurance premiums? So obviously, yeah, every ship's going to need insurance to insure the goods that they're shipping. Carbon footprint, I don't care about. Effects of disruptions lasting 3 months or more. Outsourcing and importing of goods has long been a focus for politicians. An increase in shipping lead times and impact of foreign actors on the availability of critical items only exacerbates this. Pressure for policies which encourage onshoring and where not possible, friendshoring, crucial trading goods will increase. Next, 64 countries will hold elections. In the next year, 64 countries will hold elections. Holy cow, including the United States and the UK. A geopolitical environment which already turned domestic first following recent supply chain pressures will prove ripe for politicians looking to further onshore activities. Interesting. China meddles in Taiwan's presidential elections. I literally talked about this in my last live stream. So that is kind of funny that they are bringing this up now. How is China meddling? Oh, just by saying, if someone's elected, we're going to war with you. January 13th, when millions of Taiwanese, January 13th, okay, that's in 3 days. I bet you they're going to talk about it at the presidential debate. Communist China framed the election as a choice between peace and war. It's false framing and overt election interference. Frankly, China will likely invade Taiwan regardless of whoever is elected. Hu and Co. are considered Beijing friendly because they advocate for engagement and cooperation with Beijing. The the TPP, founded in 2019, is not as influential as the KMT because the KMT has a long history of governing Taiwan, including being the island's ruling party between 49 and the 90s, so 50 years. Additionally, Hu of the KMT promised to adhere to the One China policy, which was enshrined in the Constitution. Although the KMT and Beijing have different interpretations of One China, the overall feeling is the same. Beijing doesn't hide its resentment towards lie of the DPP. It brands the DPP as a pro-independent separatist party because DPP's charter states that it aims to establish a sovereign, independent, and autonomous Republic of Taiwan. No doubt the Chinese are probably funding one party and the United States is funding the other, which would be the DPP. Beijing also sees past DPP leaders' emphasis on teaching Taiwan's history and culture in schools as covert moves toward independence. Beijing is especially concerned about the DPP's popularity with Taiwan's younger generation. It is a generation game because the longer China waits, the more the Taiwanese feel like they're their own culture and their own people. Because you have to remember their grandparents could have lived in China. Their great-grandparents could have lived in China, still have family in China, but those family ties die over time with each growing, generation, which is another reason why the Taiwan conflict, whatever that looks like, will happen in my lifetime, because Beijing, China doesn't have a lot of time to, not act anymore. 2016, the People's Liberation Army fired missiles into water near Taiwan after current President Tsai Ing-wen of the DPP won her first presidential election. During his campaign, Lai reportedly clarified that he would not seek Taiwan's independence if elected. Isn't that funny? Because people are probably scared of war. They don't want war. Interesting. I mean, a lot of this is detail oriented. You don't necessarily, you kind of get the point. Therefore, Taiwan's upcoming election is not about a choice between war and peace. Regardless of the outcome, Xi will invade Taiwan sooner or later. DPP victory probably will offer Xi a pretext to launch the invasion sooner. Taiwan's 22 million residents must recognize the harsh reality that a war is coming and choose a leader who is ready to lead them through such a challenge. Haley Ray, CFA, is an American entrepreneur, writer, and speaker. She's a senior contributor at The Federalist. Wonder who she works for. What if the drink Confucius never said? Backlash, how China's aggression has backfired. Interesting. So she's probably like a neocon. Just guessing on the titles of her books. Gaza fighting intensifies. Saudi UK ambassador. We want normalization with Israel. I hate ads. I have ad blocker, but it doesn't matter because you can't read the articles if you have ad blocker enabled, which is the bane of my existence. In Tuesday interview, when asked about establishing formal ties with Israel, Bandar described the negotiation as close to completion before the kingdom asked the U.S. to suspend the talks after the October 7th massacre in southern Israel. The ambassador reiterated his government policy that any arrangement is contingent on the creation of a Palestinian state and that future diplomatic solutions should not come at the cost of the Palestinian people. What's interesting is the Saudi Arabian officials don't necessarily actually care about the Palestinian people. They're using this as negotiational leverage. Um, and so they're all probably waiting for some certain things to happen. Um, But yeah, I don't think the Saudi officials actually care about Palestine. This is just leverage negotiating, unfortunately. In 2020, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, and Morocco signed normalization agreements with Israel under the direction of Trump, what was called the Abraham Accords, which was a very big deal because Trump was building momentum for essentially Israel to be normalized in the Middle East finally, and that momentum has now died. Momentum is all that matters. Let's look at defense. Defense is always fun. This is funny because I was listening to Tucker Carlson the other day, and he's like, "America is the only one who thinks Ukraine is winning." Jeez, yeah. See, all of these are like, "Oh, we're winning." When will Russia finally collapse? Russia's genocidal war against Ukraine. Well, I wonder what their could be the spark that makes a collapse possible. The regime, army, and economy have weakened, which is antithetical to what we read on my last live, which just said Russia actually had record GDP growth, which once again we said was going to be short term. Predictions of Russia's collapse appear to be wrong. Instead of getting weaker, Vladimir Putin realm seems to be getting stronger. One critic of the collapse argument puts it this way: 2 years on, Russia looks in an alarmingly robust condition. There we go. That's true. It's obviously makes sense to negotiate with the Kremlin now before it gets even more powerful and more stable. That may be a bitter pill to swallow for Ukrainian supporters, of course, but what's the alternative? Yeah, so the case for Russia getting stronger rests on peculiar interpretations of the existing evidence regarding the Putin regime, the war, economy, and the Russian population. It is right because where do we get the data? We get the data from the state of Russia. Why? Like, how honest do they want to be? Putin's most significant error was to pressure Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych to back out of an association agreement with the European Union in late 2013. thereby sparking the revolution of dignity that led to Yankovic's flight and then the launch of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. That's interesting. They're blaming Russia for that, even though it was a U.S.-led coup that overthrew that Ukrainian government, which is why Russia responded. The opposition Russian economist Vladimir Milov was shown that the state has invested enormously in four sectors: ammunition, railroads, military security, and machine building, directly connected to the war, while reducing or only minimally increasing investments in consumer goods. Putin's claim that GDP is growing and inflation is low, therefore, conceal the reality that average citizens are being sacrificed on the altar of militarism. As Milov points out, Russians have become significantly poor in the last 5 and especially in the last years. I have no idea if that's true. I really don't. It's our best guess. And I mean, he could be right, but it's also our best guess. Someone told me the inverse, I'd be like, who really knows? It's where unfortunately the anecdotal data would have to come in. You'd have to actually be talking to Russians and be like, how do you feel? Right? And it's a little hard for me to do. Finally, we come to the Russian population. Yes, they're inactive, and yes, that makes them morally complicit in Putin's crimes. But a significant minority, perhaps as many as one-fifth, opposed the war in Putin's fascist regime. They are largely urban, educated professionals residing in Moscow and St. Petersburg. At present, they're cowed, but as soon as an opening appears, as it inevitably will, they will make themselves heard, as do all urban, educated professionals the world over. How do we know that's true? Really, how do we know that's true at all? And what does that mean? Like, is that hinting that we'd help stage a color revolution and like activate those people? There's no way that would happen. There's no way at all that that would happen. Sorry, guys, I keep forgetting to zoom in for you. The Soviet Union's Eastern European satellites immediately come to mind, but so too do scores of countries: Argentina, Nicaragua, Egypt, Syria, Zimbabwe, and Libya. Some states, such as the Ayatollah's Iran, weather the storms of repeated upheaval and survive. Others, such as the Shah's Iran, do not. Yeah, because we overthrew the Shah of Iran. So, once again, I love how you can almost read in between the lines. Yeah. Well, we didn't overthrow the Shah. We actually overthrew the guy before him who was democratically elected, put in the Shah, and then the Shah was not able to um, disarm the radicals that we essentially empowered by putting him in place and dethroning the democratic guy all over British petroleum. How awesome is that? But we do know that in most cases, the contradictions that structural forces produce come to the fore when sparks or triggers take place. These can be assassinations, earthquakes, fires, natural disasters, or wars. Yeah, so now they're just blabbering on. Attack robots. Let me look at attack robots real quick, just because I love this stuff. I always think it's badass. Defensive AI could save lives. Right. Barack Obama was asked about the future of AI and various philosophical, technological, and ethical variables now dominating discussions as AI technology explodes. Machines can't feel joy, he told CNN. Obama said this in the context of describing how the advent and rapid arrival of new applications of AI continue to change things, rapidly bringing seemingly limitless new promises and also introducing challenges and complexities. He's quick to praise the merits of AI in his discussion, but also mentioned the challenges. Looking at ways how AI can somehow estimate, calculate, or analyze more subjective phenomenon unique to human cognition, intuition, and psychological nuances, ethics, and consciousness, like deep mind stuff. No, go away, X. It won't go away. Oh, there we go. No, it's back. Okay. Come on, tell me about the tech. Should something like a swarm of mini drone explosives close in for an attack on a salvo of incoming hypersonic missiles, approaching at speeds 5 times the speed of sound. Human decision makers simply might not be able to respond quickly enough. In fact, military commanders may not get any chance to counterattack or determine the best course of defensive action. Not only would there not be time for human decision maker to weigh in, but weapons operators themselves may simply be too overwhelmed to detect, track, engage, or fire upon high speed simultaneous attacks. There's just simply not enough time. So this is going to say that we need robots to decide for us. Can robots do this without human intervention? Essentially, should an AI enabled system which aggregates and analyzes otherwise disparate pools of incoming sensor data be able to accurately discern the difference between lethal and non lethal force? Could AI enabled interceptors be used for drone defense or method of instantly taking out incoming enemy rockets, drones, or artillery? Right now, we don't have the authority to have a human out of the loop. Right now, we don't. And that's just them saying that. Who knows if that's actually true? Within the Joint Counter Unmanned Aircraft Systems Office said during a 2021 teleconference, according to a Pentagon report, based on the existing DoD policy, you have to have a human within the decision cycle at some point to authorize the engagement, which is limiting. But yeah, exactly. What happens when an AI unprovoked says, time to nuke Russia? Pentagon report, Polini explained that there is now an emerging area of discussion pertaining to the extent to which AI might enable in the loop or out of the loop human decision making, leaving the world in the hands of algorithms for the sake of speed. As the world moves faster, humans don't have the cognitive ability to respond quickly enough. AI can make decisions in milliseconds, and we can't. Yeah, I mean, that is definitely probably where the world is headed. There's this whole idea that uh, what are we going to do when an AI algorithm tells us that now is the most optimal time to invade China? What's China going to do when their own AI and algorithm tells them now is the most optimal time to invade Taiwan? The longer you wait, the more screwed you are. AIs can view thousands of models, millions of models all at the same time and come up with potentially the best decision with the data that they're given. Creates a tricky scenario because, to that article's point, what happens when there's no human intervention? And as IoT and more things become kind of AI enabled in order to act without a human point of failure, how much power does that give AI? And that's an ethical question. It's also a very dangerous question. Strategically, especially as we get into war with mini drones and whatnot, we're going to need these drones to be able to make decisions on their own. What happens if they get disconnected from the operator, right? They may just have a command that, regardless of whether the operator can give any inputs, they may just act on their own. And they may need to do that, especially over long distances. Think of the war in Ukraine. What if drones are able to get behind enemy lines, but those enemy lines disconnect the infrastructure in order for us to communicate with those drones? You want self-acting AI drones. But then that becomes the classic problem of what happens when they start thinking for themselves? What happens when maybe they start viewing you as the enemy instead of the actual person that you're targeting? Good questions that I don't have the answer to. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. I'll be back probably sometime Friday.